Lucy Thompson lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by golden fields and dusty roads. Her house was a little white cottage with blue shutters and a red mailbox. She loved two things more than anything else: baking and making people smile. Every Saturday morning, her kitchen filled with the sweet smell of cookies, pies, and fresh bread. The windows would fog up from all the baking, and her old radio played soft music in the background. One evening, as Lucy sat in her cozy living room with a cup of tea, she read an article in the town newspaper. The headline caught her eye: "Soldiers overseas miss home the most during holidays." The story talked about how many soldiers felt lonely and far from their families. They missed the small things: the sound of home, the smell of fresh baking, a handwritten note. Lucy put down her tea and thought hard. What could she do? She was just one person in a tiny town. But then an idea popped into her mind. She could bake cookies and send them to the soldiers. Maybe, just maybe, a sweet treat would bring them a little happiness, even if it was only for a moment. The next morning, Lucy pulled out her old family recipes. She chose the best ones: chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, and peanut butter cookies. She made a list of everything she needed and headed into town. At the small grocery store, she filled her cart with bags of sugar, flour, butter, and chocolate chips. The cashier smiled and asked, "Having a big party?" Lucy just smiled back and said, "Something like that." Back home, she tied her apron around her waist and got to work. She mixed, stirred, and scooped. The oven warmed the house, and soon the air smelled so sweet that even the neighbor's dog came over, wagging his tail at the door. By the time the sun went down, Lucy had stacks and stacks of cookies cooling on every surface she could find: the counters, the kitchen table, even the windowsills. But Lucy didn't stop there. She sat down and wrote little notes to tuck into each box. She wrote simple messages like, "Thank you for your service, and we are thinking of you." She wanted each soldier who opened a box to feel like someone back home cared. The next day, she packed the cookies carefully into boxes lined with colorful tissue paper. She sealed each one tightly and took them to the post office. The clerk, Mr. Henry, raised an eyebrow when he saw all the boxes. "Sending treats to family?" he asked. Lucy shook her head and said, "No, these are for soldiers overseas. I just want them to have a piece of home." Mr. Henry smiled and helped her stack the boxes behind the counter. As she left the post office, Lucy felt a warm feeling in her heart. She didn't know who would open the boxes or if they would even make it across the world, but she knew she had done something good. And sometimes, doing something small with great love could make all the difference. Weeks passed quietly after Lucy sent her boxes of cookies. She kept herself busy with baking, gardening, and helping out at the local library. Sometimes she would wonder about the cookies. Had they made it? Had someone smiled when they opened a box? She had no way of knowing, but she kept hoping. One afternoon, as Lucy sorted books at the library, the postmaster, Mr. Henry, walked in holding a bundle of letters. He spotted Lucy near the history section and called out, "These are for you." Surprised, Lucy wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. She looked down at the stack of envelopes. They were covered in different handwriting, all addressed to her. Lucy sat down on a wooden chair and opened the first letter. It was from a soldier named Private Jenkins. He wrote about how he had just come back to camp after a long day, feeling tired and homesick. When he opened a box of cookies and read Lucy's note, he said it was like getting a hug from home. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, and she carefully placed the letter back into its envelope. Each letter told a different story. One soldier said he shared the cookies with his whole unit, and they all cheered. Another said the cookies reminded him of baking days with his grandmother. Some soldiers simply wrote "thank you" in big, careful handwriting. Lucy read every single word, her heart growing warmer with each letter. When she finished reading, Lucy sat for a while thinking. She had started this as a small act of kindness, but it seemed to mean much more than she had imagined. It was not just about cookies. It was about connection, about reminding the soldiers that someone back home remembered them. Later that evening, Lucy gathered her family around the dining table. She showed them the letters and told them about the soldiers' stories. Her two children, Ben and Emily, listened carefully. Emily, who was only 8, asked if they could help bake more cookies. Ben, A teenager who usually preferred video games nodded and said he could help pack the boxes. Lucy smiled and agreed. The next Saturday, they turned the kitchen into a little bakery again. This time, it felt even more special. They mixed huge bowls of dough, rolled out cookies, and carefully placed them on baking sheets. The whole house smelled like vanilla, cinnamon, and chocolate. They also wrote new notes, each one filled with simple words of encouragement. "You are not forgotten. Thank you for your bravery," and sending smiles from Kansas. Lucy decorated some of the notes with little hand-drawn flags and hearts. The family packed up the new batch of cookies, sealing each box tightly. When they dropped the boxes off at the post office, Mr. Henry gave them a big thumbs up. "Keep up the good work," he said with a grin. As they walked back home, Lucy felt lighter, as if the simple act of baking had built an invisible bridge across the world. Even though she had never met these soldiers, somehow, they were all connected now, one cookie at a time. After Lucy sent off her second batch of cookies, she tried to go back to her usual routine. But every time the postman arrived, Lucy couldn't help but feel a little excited. What if there was another letter? Another thank you note from a soldier? It was a feeling she couldn't shake, and soon she started checking the mailbox every day. One morning, just as she finished watering her garden, Lucy noticed the postman walking down her street. She waved to him, and he waved back with a smile. When he got to her house, he handed her a small package, carefully wrapped in brown paper. It wasn't too big, but it was heavy. Lucy took it inside, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Could it be from one of the soldiers? She carefully opened the package with a pair of scissors, her heart racing. Inside, there was a letter, but this wasn't an ordinary letter. It was wrapped in a red ribbon and sealed with a small golden stamp. Lucy slowly pulled the letter out and unfolded it. The letter was from Sergeant Elizabeth Carson, a woman who had been serving overseas. She explained how much the cookies had meant to her and her team. But there was something more. Inside the envelope, there was a small hand-drawn picture of the soldiers standing together in front of their camp, smiling and holding up a sign that said, "Thank you, Lucy." Sergeant Carson wrote that they had shared the cookies during a celebration, and that moment had helped them forget the struggles of their long deployment, even if just for a while. Lucy stared at the drawing, her eyes wide in surprise. She had never expected this. The soldiers had not only appreciated the cookies, but they had also taken the time to send something back, something that showed how much her simple act had meant to them. The next day, Lucy couldn't stop talking about the letter and the drawing. She showed it to her family, her neighbors, and even to Mr. Henry at the post office. Everyone in town was amazed by the story. It was as if Lucy's small gesture had grown into something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. As more time passed, Lucy received more letters and even a few more drawings. Soldiers would write about how the cookies made them feel closer to home, and how the small notes had brightened their day. One soldier told Lucy that he had kept the note she wrote him in his pocket for good luck during tough missions. Reading these letters filled Lucy's heart with warmth. She realized that while she couldn't change the big things in the world, she could make a difference with small, thoughtful acts. As the weeks went by, the cookie project continued to grow. Lucy couldn't keep up with all the letters and requests for more cookies. But it wasn't just about the baking anymore. It was about the connections she had made, the smiles she had shared, and the bonds that reached across the world with a simple gift. Every time Lucy baked another batch of cookies, she knew that even though they were just sweets, they carried something much more important: kindness. As the months went by, Lucy's cookie mission continued to grow. What had started as a small personal project had turned into something much bigger. More and more people in the town wanted to help. The local school organized a cookie drive, and kids would pack the cookies into boxes after school. The bakery down the street donated extra supplies, and even the town's fire station pitched in. Everyone was excited to be part of something that brought so much joy to the soldiers overseas. Lucy was amazed by how much support she had gotten. Every weekend, her house became a busy kitchen filled with the laughter of children, the hum of the oven, and the sound of dough being mixed. Her two kids, Ben and Emily, loved helping, and even her husband, Mike, who usually kept to himself, started coming into the kitchen to roll the dough into perfect balls. It had become a family tradition. On one Saturday morning, Lucy received an unexpected phone call. It was from a woman named Maria, who worked for a nonprofit that sent care packages to military personnel around the world. She had heard about Lucy's cookie project and wanted to help. "We've been sending snacks to soldiers for years," Maria explained. "But your cookies have been the talk of the base. Would you be interested in sending a larger shipment to several camps?" Lucy was stunned. She had never imagined that something so simple would catch the attention of people in charge of sending care packages. She took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, we would love to help. How can we make it work?" The two women made plans, and soon Lucy's cookies would be sent to several military camps all over the world. Lucy couldn't believe it. What started as a small, kind act had now turned into something that would reach even more soldiers in need of a smile. That evening, Lucy sat down with her family and shared the news. Everyone was excited, and they couldn't wait to get started on the new batch of cookies. Even the neighbors joined in, and soon they were organizing bigger cookie-making days at the local community center. It felt as though the entire town had become part of this larger mission. One day, Lucy received a package in the mail. She opened it to find several postcards from soldiers who had received her cookies. One soldier, named Sergeant James, wrote, "We were having a tough day when your package arrived, but after sharing your cookies with my team, we all felt a little brighter. Thank you for reminding us that people care." Another card, from Private Sarah, simply said, "These cookies are the best thing we've tasted in months. Thank you for your kindness." Lucy smiled as she read the postcards, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had never imagined that her simple act of baking could create such a ripple effect. The cookies weren't just food. They were a reminder to the soldiers that they were not forgotten, that someone, thousands of miles away, was thinking of them. As Lucy baked yet another batch of cookies, she realized that kindness didn't have to be grand. Sometimes the smallest things could make the biggest difference. And in that moment, she knew she would continue baking, not because she had to, but because she wanted to bring a little more light into the world, one cookie at a time. Lucy's cookie mission was now known all over town, and people continued to join in. The small town that she had always known as quiet and peaceful had become a place filled with excitement and purpose. Every corner seemed to buzz with people eager to help, whether it was baking, packing boxes, or writing kind notes for the soldiers. One day, Lucy received a phone call that she would never forget. It was from a military officer who worked in charge of logistics for several camps. His voice was warm and grateful as he spoke. "Lucy," he said, "I'm Lieutenant Dunn, and I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done. Your cookies have been a huge hit with our troops. In fact, we've been sharing them with soldiers who are far from home, and they're all asking where they came from." Lucy felt a wave of pride and joy fill her. She had always believed that a small act of kindness could make a difference, but to hear it from a soldier made everything feel real. "I'm just glad we can help," she replied humbly. "Well, there's more," Lieutenant Dunn continued. "We're planning a special event for the soldiers, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. We were wondering if you would be willing to send cookies for a large celebration we're planning at one of the military bases." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. The idea of sending cookies for an event for so many soldiers was beyond anything she had imagined. She didn't even know where to begin. But as she thought about it, she realized there was no better way to spread kindness. With a deep breath, Lucy agreed, knowing that it would be a lot of work, but it was a cause worth every effort. The next few weeks were a blur of baking and organizing. The whole town came together to help. Even the local high school offered to package the cookies, and the small grocery stores donated extra supplies. Lucy's kitchen, once filled with just her and her children, now hosted dozens of volunteers, all working together with one goal in mind: to make the event a success. On the day the cookies were ready to be shipped, Lucy stood in her front yard, looking at the large pile of boxes, each filled with cookies, ready to be sent out. She couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished. It wasn't just about the cookies anymore. It was about the community coming together to support those who served their country. As the boxes were loaded onto the trucks, Lucy waved goodbye to the helpers and watched as the trucks drove away. She couldn't wait to hear the stories that would come from this event. She had no idea how many soldiers would be touched by the cookies, but she knew that each one would carry a little bit of home with them. That night, Lucy sat by the window, looking out at the stars. The quiet of the night was comforting, but her heart was full. She realized that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could change the world in ways she never expected. And all it took was a few cookies and a lot of love. Weeks passed, and Lucy's cookie mission continued to bring joy and comfort to soldiers around the world. She had received dozens of letters, postcards, and even a few more drawings. Each note she read filled her with gratitude and warmth. It felt like her small act of kindness had become something much bigger than she could ever have imagined. One morning, Lucy received a letter that stood out among the others. It was from a soldier named Corporal James Harrison, and it wasn't like the usual thank you notes she had received. This one was different. Lucy opened the envelope and began to read. Dear Lucy, I don't know how to begin this letter, but I feel like I must write to you. The cookies you sent didn't just make my day better. They made my entire year. When I first tasted them, it brought me back to my childhood. My mother used to bake cookies just like the ones you sent, and it felt like a piece of home was with me again. But there's something more important I want to share. I've been in the military for 5 years, and I've seen a lot of tough things. Sometimes it's hard to feel connected to anything outside of the job we do. But your cookies, your kindness, it reminded me that there are still good things in the world. It reminded me of who I am and what I'm fighting for. Thank you, Lucy, for showing me that no matter where we are never truly alone. Your kindness has been a gift, one that I'll carry with me forever. I hope one day I can pass it on to someone else. With gratitude, Corporal James Harrison. Lucy sat down at the kitchen table, holding the letter in her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. It was one thing to hear that people appreciated her cookies, but it was something entirely different to hear that her small act of kindness had helped a soldier feel connected to home, reminded him of his own family, and even inspired him to share kindness with others. Lucy wiped away a tear, her heart full of gratitude. She immediately showed the letter to her children. Ben, who was now helping more often, stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. Mom, this is amazing, he said softly. You've really made a difference. Lucy smiled at her son. We all have, sweetie, she replied. This is a team effort. Word about Lucy's cookie mission continued to spread. It wasn't just about the cookies anymore. It was about the community, the connections, and the kindness that had grown from something so simple. More people reached out to help, and more soldiers shared their stories. As Lucy baked yet another batch of cookies, she realized that what had started as a small idea to brighten a few people's days had turned into something much bigger. It wasn't just about the cookies. It was about spreading hope, creating bonds, and reminding people that no matter how far apart they were never truly alone. And every time Lucy pulled a fresh batch of cookies out of the oven, she knew she was doing exactly what she was meant to do, making the world a little sweeter, one cookie at a time. As the months passed, Lucy's cookie project became something everyone in town looked forward to. What had started as a small act of kindness had grown into a community-wide effort that seemed to touch more people than she could have ever imagined. More letters arrived from soldiers, each one telling a unique story of how the cookies had lifted their spirits during tough times. Some soldiers shared how they had shared the cookies with their friends, while others talked about how they had saved a cookie for a special moment, just to remind them of home. One afternoon, as Lucy was organizing another batch of cookies in her kitchen, she received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. She picked up, wondering who it might be. "Hello, Lucy," a voice asked, sounding familiar but different. "Yes, this is Lucy," she replied, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hi, Lucy," the voice said. "I'm Sergeant Carson. You might not remember me, but I wrote to you a while back, thanking you for the cookies. I wanted to let you know that they'd made a real difference to so many of us. Your kindness means more than you can imagine." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Sergeant Carson had written her a thank you note months ago, and hearing from her again was a pleasant surprise. "I'm so glad the cookies helped," Lucy said. "It's really the least I could do." "Well, there's more," Sergeant Carson continued. "I wanted to tell you about a special moment. Last month, we were in a place where it was hard to see any hope. The weather was cold, and we were all feeling pretty low. But then your cookies arrived. We gathered around and shared them, and for the first time in weeks, we felt a little bit of warmth, not just from the cookies, but from the reminder that people back home care. It helped us push through that tough time. I can't thank you enough for that. Lucy paused for a moment, feeling the weight of Sergeant Carson's words. It was hard to imagine how a simple batch of cookies could have such a powerful impact, but hearing this made it all real. Thank you for sharing that with me, Lucy said, her voice filled with emotion. I'm just so happy to hear that it made a difference. Sergeant Carson smiled through the phone. Lucy, we're all in this together. What you've done has shown us that. And I wanted to tell you that we're planning something special for you. Lucy felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. Something for me? Yes, Sergeant Carson replied. We're going to be celebrating all of your kindness. We want to send you a little something from all of us as a thank you for everything you've done. It won't be much, but it's a small way for us to show our appreciation. Lucy couldn't believe what she was hearing. The soldiers who had been far from home were now planning to send her a thank you gift. It was a reminder that kindness had a way of coming full circle, and it left Lucy feeling incredibly humbled. As the call ended, Lucy set the phone down and looked out the window. She realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, like a batch of homemade cookies, could create ripples of kindness that reached farther than anyone could ever imagine. A few weeks after Lucy's phone call with Sergeant Carson, a small package arrived at her doorstep. It was much smaller than the boxes of cookies she usually sent out, and it was neatly wrapped in brown paper with a simple note on top. Lucy felt a curious excitement as she opened it. Inside, she found a beautifully crafted wooden plaque. It was small but heavy, and engraved with words that filled Lucy's heart with warmth. The plaque read, "To Lucy, for spreading kindness one cookie at a time. Your generosity has touched many hearts. With gratitude, the soldiers of Base Camp Echo." Lucy carefully ran her fingers over the words, a tear slipping down her cheek. She had never expected anything in return, but this gift, a token of appreciation from the soldiers, meant more to her than she could express. It wasn't just about the cookies anymore. It was about the connections, the kindness, and the bonds that had formed between people who had never met but shared a common thread of humanity. The next morning, Lucy placed the plaque on her kitchen counter, where she could see it every day. She smiled as she thought about all the soldiers she had never met but felt so deeply connected to. The simple act of baking cookies had started a wave of kindness that reached far beyond her small town, and she realized that the world was much smaller than it seemed. As the days went by, Lucy continued baking and sending cookies to soldiers. The project was no longer just about her. It was about everyone who had helped, from her children and neighbors to the local bakery and the kind people who had donated supplies. It had become a shared effort, a reminder that even in times of difficulty, kindness could shine through. Lucy often thought about the impact of those first cookies she had sent. She had never imagined that something so simple could change so many lives. But as she looked at the wooden plaque, she understood that kindness, no matter how small, was never wasted. It had a ripple effect, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. And though Lucy continued to bake, she no longer felt that the project was something she had to do. It was something she wanted to do, a way to keep spreading the joy, the warmth, and the love that had come from those first batches of cookies. As she baked each new batch, she knew she was doing something that mattered and that the world needed more of it. Sometimes Lucy would sit down after baking, a quiet moment to herself, and reflect on the journey. From a small idea to a large community effort, it had all started with a few cookies, and now it had turned into a story of kindness that would be remembered for years to come. Lucy smiled softly as she thought about all the people who had been touched by the cookies. She knew that, in her own small way, she had made the world a little better, one cookie at a time.